Welcome back to the Dad Days, everyone. Today, we're making homemade sauerkraut. Stay tuned. I'm going to quickly go through everything that you need to make sauerkraut in your kitchen. Cabbage, your knife of choice, mason jars. I'm going to be using these airlock lids, and I'll show you how to use mason jars with an airlock. The airlocks look like this. You can also use a regular lid, and I'll show you how that looks as well. I'm using Redmond's real salt and a mixing bowl to put your cabbage in. I'm going to link all the products in the description below of this video. They're affiliate links, so they won't cost you a penny more, but they'll support my channel, which I truly appreciate. Thanks, everyone. Now let's start making some sauerkraut. The first step is just removing the outer layers of the skin from the cabbage. You just don't want to use anything that's not clean. I'm going to use this in my compost. Okay, the second step is to just cut up the cabbage in whatever shape or desired size that you want for your sauerkraut. I don't have a mandolin or a shredder or anything, so I'm just going to be dicing mine up in a fine chop. First, I'll remove the stem. First, I'll cut it in half and then remove the stem and then chop it up. I don't mind if mine's a little bigger and not perfectly uniform, so this is great for me. Okay, once you have all your cabbage diced up and in the bowls, you want to liberally sprinkle salt over the top of the cabbage. I'm just going to say it's about 1 head of cabbage per bowl. They were medium-sized heads. I'll probably use at least 2 tablespoons in each bowl here. Once they've been sprinkled with salt, you just want to squeeze it and massage the salt into the cabbage, and it will start to release the liquid, the water, the juice out of the cabbage. And you do that about once every 5 minutes for 15-20 minutes. And once it's released enough of the juice out of the inside of the cabbage, that's when you put it into the mason jars, and then you pour the remaining juice into the jars on top of the cabbage, and I'll show you what that looks like. Okay, that's good. I massaged it for probably 2 or 3 minutes. Now I'll just let it sit for about 5 minutes and then repeat that step again. Okay, we just massaged the cabbage and we're waiting on it to release the juice to be able to pack it into jars. But I just wanted to take a minute and say, our family loves sauerkraut, and a few things about it. It's like a superfood. It's full of probiotics, It supports great microbiome health for your gut. We try and incorporate it as much as we can. I'll eat even just a little bowl with my lunch or whatever. I just try and get it at least a few times a week. But something to look for when if you were to say you don't want to make it yourself and you want to buy it in the grocery store, I would recommend looking for a refrigerated version. Typically, if it's in a bag or a container that's on the shelf, that means it's going to be pasteurized. It's not going to have any of the probiotic benefits. You really want to look in the refrigerated section and try and find some sauerkraut in the refrigerated section, because that means that it definitely has the probiotic benefits that you're looking for when you want to eat sauerkraut. So there's a tip. Okay, so the sauerkraut had been sitting for probably 15 minutes or so. I've massaged it a few times. As you can see, there's liquid that's starting to come out of it. That's perfect. One thing I don't have, and I'll try and find one to link in the description, is a mason jar funnel. It makes it a little easier to put the sauerkraut or to put the cabbage into the mason jar, but you can just do it by hand, which is what I'll be doing today. Basically, you just want to put the sauerkraut or the cabbage into the mason jar. I do a couple handfuls at a time. I try and keep one hand a little clean. I actually made my own sauerkraut damper out of a piece of wood, but you can use the handle of a big wooden spoon or a spatula or anything like that that you have that you can use to smash the sauerkraut down, because you basically want to compact the sauerkraut into the mason jar as tight as possible. It also helps with releasing more liquid. Okay, that's the first jar. You can see basically one medium head of cabbage is able to fit into one quart-size mason jar. You can also see that it produced enough liquid of its own just by tamping it down that I didn't even need to use the rest of the liquid that was left in the bowl. If for some reason your cabbage doesn't make enough liquid as you tamp it down, then you would just, any remaining liquid in the bowl, you would pour into your jar. Ultimately, you want your cabbage that's in the jar to be submerged and stay underneath of the liquid. Just repeat those steps until you're out of cabbage, until it's packed into all of your jars. If you're using an airlock style lid, it comes with an airlock. There's three pieces. There's this chamber part, there's the inner, this little cap part that goes inside, and then there's the actual lid to the airlock. This chamber part, you can see there's a hollow tube inside. That allows air and gas that forms as it starts to ferment to come up through that tube on the inside and burp itself into the water, but it does not allow bacteria to come back inside of the jar. So it's just a little more sanitary, a little more safe than using just a regular lid. But I've used a regular lid many times and been successful, and it's been totally fine. So Either way is an okay option. You can see the inner part goes over top of that tube on the inside. You want the water to be halfway up the inside of the chamber. If you can tell, it looks about like that when it has water inside of it. Then you just add the cap, and then it just inserts to the little gasket that's on the lid, and it screws tight on your jar. Before I screw it on, I'm just going to clean up the seal. One thing I forgot to mention is I also have these glass fermentation weights. They look like this and they fit right down on the inside of your jar. And it just helps hold all of the floaties underneath and keep as much cabbage as possible underneath of the liquid during fermentation. And then you just screw that tight. And that's your finished jar. It will just sit like this. We usually ferment our sauerkraut for about a month, 4 weeks, 5 weeks. But after about 2 weeks, you could start to taste it if you're careful and you used a sanitized, a clean utensil when you dip into it. You could really just start to taste it and see what level of fermentation you like as you make it for yourself. Now, if you're using just a regular lid, a regular mason jar lid, all you would do is just lightly screw it on. You don't want it to be tight at all because you want air to be able to escape. And even doing that, you would want to, every other day or so, just loosen it up and open it up and make sure you burp your jar. So just in case you screw it too tight or something, you're not having too much pressure build up inside of your jar. So that's really it when it comes to sauerkraut. I almost always have a jar fermenting on the counter. It's super simple. Once you get the hang of it, it really only takes about 30 minutes out of your day to get a batch going. Once it is complete, it lasts for quite a while in your fridge. I used some purple cabbage and made a batch of sauerkraut, and it's honestly been in the fridge for probably 2 months. It's still delicious. It lasts for quite a while. Once you move it to the fridge, it really slows down fermentation. So if you are tasting it periodically after 2 weeks and you taste it and you really like it, I would recommend just taking off the airlock lid, putting on a regular mason jar lid, and just popping it in the fridge, and it'll last for months in the fridge. So that's really it. I hope you enjoyed today's episode, and as always, stay tuned for more dad days.